Thank you so much, Chiara, and thanks so much for having this opportunity to engage with the Italian markets and in such a indeed beautiful place. I'm used to have a lot of meetings in great Brussels, in ugly buildings, and so this is extremely refreshing. And so hopefully my topic will also be refreshing at this very early moment in the day. So in the meantime, I got my slides. Perfect. Okay.
Technology now.
Yeah, technology is also very important for the future of corporate reporting. So hopefully, technology will be at my side today. So, just to give you an overview. So I'm working for Accountancy Europe. We represent the accountancy and the audit community across Europe, and I'm actually responsible for corporate reporting and public sector reporting. So just a very quick overview of our activities related to the future of corporate reporting. So Accountancy Europe in 2015, we published a Cogito paper called The Future of Corporate Reporting, Creating the Dynamics of Change. And actually, this paper was extremely well perceived by the market. We got a lot of interesting discussions with the different stakeholders. And this paper was quite big. It was not a concise report. And it tackles a lot of different topics, actually. So it talked about the growing audience, should we still focus on investors or should we also look to other stakeholders, users, citizens, unions and other involved parties. Then secondly, we also spent some time on the interconnected financial and non-financial information, because we believe today we're still sometimes focusing too much on financial reporting, and we believe that we should really evolve to a more corporate reporting scene, which actually brings together financial and non-financial information in an interconnected way. Then thirdly, we launched this core and more concept, which I will explain more in detail further on. And actually, in essence, this is a presentation concept. How can we bring all this information together in an interconnected, structured, and logical way? And then finally, as I was already pointing to it with the slide tool. So we believe that technology, will be a very important enabler and driver for change in the future. Unfortunately, today we still see that corporate reporting, it's a big booklet, a lot of pages, disclosure overload, and we really believe that it's time that we move to the next step and that we come with some more technology-driven reporting. So having said that, in March 2017, based on all the input we received from different stakeholders, we actually decided to focus on 3 topics going forward. First, we heard that people loved core and more concept. They really liked the idea behind it, but they wanted to see more substance to this concept. Secondly, we see a lot of proliferation of non-financial information frameworks around the globe. We counted sometimes like over 2,000 initiatives. I wouldn't call them frameworks, but sometimes it's just ideas. But we see a lot of very promising initiatives, but we think that at this time it's important that they start at least coordinating their different initiatives. And then thirdly, we will also do some work on technology. So that are the 3 key areas that we identified as our next steps on the future of corporate reporting. Then in September 2017, not long ago, we have a event in Brussels on the future of corporate reporting, where we had the privilege to have Massimo Romano from Generali to give the preparers side inputs. Also from the IRC, we had the pleasure to have Richard Howitt over for a keynote speech. And there we actually launched 2 publications. So core and more, because we received the comments from stakeholders that they wanted to have some more, detailed guidance around these concepts. We published this core and more Cogito paper. And secondly, we also launched a call for action to the different involved stakeholders to start, working on this improved coordination of the different NFI frameworks and initiatives. And in the remainder of this presentation, I will focus on these two papers. So first of all, this whole core and more concept actually really entails smarter reporting. So it's about organizing reporting in a more connected, logical and structured way. Because today when we look to the reporting of entities, we see like really a patchwork of unconnected reporting. We see strategic reports, as a management report, we see sustainability reporting, we see annual reports, endless financial reporting disclosures based on the IFRS requirements. And sometimes we even see duplicate information, and sometimes it's even not consistent. So we really believe that everything, should be connected, brought together, and that's why we came up with this core and more concept, which in essence really would like to result in more effective communication by entities with a wider audience. And those different building blocks being the core, and then all those different more blocks would be enabled by technology, having links between those different building blocks. So the core would really be some kind of an executive report focusing on the most material and relevant information of a company. So Kiara, it was very interesting to hear that in the introduction you said like some kind of a 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes overview of, the most relevant and material information of an entity. And we also believe that, we see society is evolving, and we see that not just investors are interested in the reporting of entities. And so we believe that this core report should really be addressed to a wider audience beyond the investor community. So that's our core. And then actually we have these more reports where there is clearly a link to the core report, and those more reports would really be focused on the needs of more specific stakeholders. For example, stakeholders are extremely interested in the corporate governance activities of an entity. Well, the details would be, for example, in a more report, whereas the key areas are covered in a core report. So the core would address a wider stakeholder audience, where the more reports, we believe, should address all the needs of also more specific stakeholders. But very important, we don't have Chinese walls. Those two components should be interlinked. So that's like really in a nutshell, what this core and more is about. Then a couple of more, details. So this core report, we came up with a couple of underlying principles just to make sure that we have qualitative reporting. These points may seem extremely straightforward. Unfortunately, when we're looking to the reports of companies these days, in a lot of cases we see very long reporting, very boilerplate, and it clearly doesn't meet these qualitative characteristics. So we find it very important, again, to make an overview of these elements. So it's important that it's clear, that we have a fair and balanced view, meaning good and bad news, right? Corporate reporting is not just focusing only on what's going good. No, it's also like focusing on the risks, the challenges, and we believe that both of these elements should be reflected appropriately in the financial statements. Then it should be organization specific. So, boilerplate disclosures, it's a waste of everyone's time. users are not interested in this kind of tick-the-box exercises. Then in a core report, again, very important to be material and to disclose relevant information. We are totally aware of the fact if you're focusing in the core report to a wider stakeholder audience, then the concepts of materiality and relevance become much more challenging, because in today's corporate reporting world, those concepts are really based on the investor community. Of course, if you're going to widen this audience, then the concept of relevance and material becomes much more difficult to determine. So very interesting concept, but it might be challenging. Consistent and comparable, reliable, verifiable, and reasonably measurable. This reasonably measurable, it's very relevant with respect to non-financial information, because there we see again what Chiara was referring to, that the whole processes of gathering information about non-financial information, really finding good ways to measure those indicators, it's still a work in progress, I will say. So it's not at the same maturity as financial reporting is today. So that's definitely a working point as well. Then again, we love technology, and of course, it's very important to link this core report with the more components. Then, although I said core and more, in essence, it's really a presentation model. So we, do not aim to be a framework setter, we don't have that mandate, we don't have the headcount to do that. So this is essentially about the presentation concept. Nevertheless, for people to get some kind of understanding of what we are talking about, we stipulated some content suggestions. So what could potentially be covered in a core report, and what, on the other hand, should be reflected in the more reports. So based on a lot of discussions with different parties, we came up with this list. So in a core report, we believe we should focus on the business model and strategy. We should have the key figures of financial statements and an analysis thereon. So clearly, based on discussions with our stakeholders, we don't believe that the total, phase financial statements with all the detailed disclosure should be in the core report. No, we think that really the key performance indicators at that level and the description thereof should be included in a core report, and like the whole primary financial statements, including disclosures, would be one of a more report. Then secondly, we have financial information, of course. The NFI agenda is also extremely important, and key information on these NFI indicators would be covered as well in the core report. Key prospects, main risks, and the related risk mitigation strategies are examples of what could be covered in such a core report, and of course, key aspects of corporate governance. Then we look to the more reports, which are, of course, interlinked with this core report. There we formulated some proposals as well. So these would really focus on the details, because the most material and relevant info would be covered in the core report. So what are we here, for example, talking about? Well, details on the risk management reporting and internal controls, more detailed information on corporate governance, the primary financial statements with detailed financial statement disclosures, what we now know as the IFRS financial statements, the face and then all the disclosures, detailed sustainability information. You all know in IFRS, for example, the criteria are extremely severe with respect to the recognition of intangible assets. Internally generated intangible assets cannot be recognized, and for external ones, the definition and the recognition criteria are very at a very high level. The bar is very high. So we know that the companies, when you look to the stock, the value of a company, the stock value, and you compare it with the book value, most of the time there's a huge gap. And people are really interested to know, how the how to explain the difference. So we know there's a lot of intangible assets, out there which are not recognized in the IFRS financial statements. And so, these unrecognized intangible assets could also be part of such more reports. Then tax reporting, for example, country by country reporting could be included in such more reports, and also employee related and remuneration reports could be included in those more blocks. Then a couple of other considerations. So we got a lot of questions of, okay, very nice, fancy concept, but how does this tie in with the regulatory and legal environment? So we had quite some discussions about that as well. And in the end, to have a very relevant core report, which is very useful for the users, we didn't want to end up in a tick-the-box exercise. So we wouldn't put the barrier and say, well, a core report should meet all legal requirements, because then it would undermine, the whole idea behind being concise, being added value, really focusing on the needs of the stakeholders. So we ended up saying, well, probably the core report won't meet all the legal and regulatory requirements, but the suite of the core report with the more reports would normally meet these regulatory requirements, just to make sure that you avoid another layer of reporting for the regulatory and legal requirements. So the whole set of core and more reports would meet the legal requirements. Then what I already mentioned some time, and technology is working very well over here. So technology, is really key for us. I think that would really be an enabler for such a concept to work, because we really believe very strong in some kind of online reporting. We think paper reporting, the PDF reporting, we think, okay, that should be from a long time ago, and should really evolve, because if corporate reporting doesn't keep track with developments, then I think other information providers outside the company will actually, provide information to stakeholders, and will actually undermine companies of doing their own communication. So we believe very strongly in online reporting. There are already a couple of entities which are experimenting with online reporting. Linked with it, navigation, to navigate between those core and more reports. There are endless opportunities, of course, of technology for reporting. Think about dashboard reporting, that actually, based on the more reports, stakeholders can really, make an own selection of information that's relevant for them and populate some kind of a dashboard report. For the more reports, there are also a lot of possibilities where you can click on a certain figure and then get immediately to the detailed notes, for example, because now, sometimes you have hundreds of pages and you're just looking for this segment information and you just cannot find the information. So, that would be very user-friendly as well. And then, of course, link with the next speaker, integrated reporting, because we got a lot of questions like, how is this core and more related to integrated reporting? What are the addressing? Well, as I said clearly, we totally do not aim to be a framework setter. We don't have the mandate, and we just come with this presentation model where we believe currently, if you look at the ISB, they're trying to tackle this disclosure overload problem, but I'm not convinced that with standard setting they're going to solve this issue, because it's really about the mentality, it's really about culture, and it's also about how you present or organize your financial information. And we believe that this core and more could really be helpful in that respect. But clearly, you know, we think this is work in progress. These are ideas, and we really encourage now the business community to start experimenting with this core and more concept to further fine-tune this model and really bring it to life. And I think, so we have a little bit the same roadmap as integrated reporting of, you know, further developing and improving. And I know integrated reporting, you know, very recently did a whole implementation outreach activity, you know, to get input from the market and to learn from participants and to see where there are questions. So I believe it's a very interesting journey. So I was referring to our Future of Corporate Reporting event in September. So we launched this Core and More paper. Next to that, we issued also a call for action to enhance the coordination of the different NFI frameworks and initiatives, because we see really in the market, as said before, really a significant proliferation of different initiatives. And we really believe that there should be greater standardization. And, you know, hopefully, eventually, we will have some kind of a robust global, you know, principle-based framework for also non-financial information reporting. It's not us saying that, actually, it's when we listen to the different stakeholders, to preparers, to investors, they're sometimes a little bit lost because there's so much guidance out there, and it's really difficult for them to have like a clear overview. What are the expectations? What are the principles, and what should we reflect in the corporate reporting? You know, for financial reporting, we have now IFRS. You know, clearly everyone has a clear overview of these principles. They're not perfect, but it's a good starting point. Well, we are, you know, we are aiming to achieve something similar for NFI. And really, at the end, I believe there should be one framework covering everything. That would be wonderful, that we do no longer have to make the distinction between financial and non-financial information, because in the end, no one is interested in this arbitrary, you know, groups. I think it's all about corporate reporting and telling your story, and that should be the focus point. So again, you know, to get eventually to this agenda, we first believe in cooperation. You know, we see the corporate reporting dialogue is already doing something promising at that level. Then improved coordination of the different frameworks, try to avoid overlap, take, you know, the good bits from certain initiatives. They're very niche initiatives who only focus on, you know, climate matters and so on. So bring all this, and then hopefully one day come to this consolidation. In this call for action, we also referred explicitly to the ISB, because we had the pleasure of having Hans Hogevorst, the chairman of the ISB, at our event for his keynote speech. And actually, you know, he was quite skeptic. His speech is actually still online, and he was kind of skeptic of this role of the ISB in this wider corporate reporting agenda. But we noted really over the time now some very interesting, you know, evolution. And if I understood it well, last week the ISB board accepted to do an update of their practice statement on management commentary, which would actually be a very interesting vehicle for the ISB to take up this role of non-financial information. Because, you know, they've proven to be extremely successful in building a robust global principle framework for financial reporting. And, you know, they could help bringing everyone together and, you know, to bring this agenda forward. So again, that's a very promising perspective. So very, very quickly, because otherwise I'm running over time. So one of the other concepts that we launched in our Core and More paper is this corporate reporting lab. Because we see there's a lot of regulation in the market, and we actually would like to see more market-driven, you know, solutions for issues that corporate reporting of today is actually facing. So we would like to have this lab to foster innovation in the corporate reporting scene and to share best reporting practices. And actually, after our event in September, the European Commission came to us with respect to this initiative. And actually, you know, they were extremely interested in this concept, which actually already exists in the UK, the Financial Reporting Lab, that mainly brings preparers and investors together to try to tackle, you know, issues in the corporate reporting scene very successfully. And so we are now discussing with the EU Commission how we could actually shape this idea. So that's again a very interesting initiative where instead of coming with additional regulation for entities, you know, we would bring the different stakeholders together around a certain topic and they, you know, would come to some kind of a workable, really practical solution of a specific issue. And clearly, you know, this would also cover wider corporate reporting topics, not just the typical financial reporting. And of course, the outputs of these lab would of course be publicly available. So to finalize, unfortunately, I'm not done with my work yet, so there's still a whole agenda to cover. So these are a couple of items, you know, for the future. So we really hope that the companies start experimenting with these core and more concepts. So hopefully, you know, even insurance companies would be interested to start, you know, exploring the idea of core and more. Then we will follow up on this call of the coordination of these NFI reporting initiatives and frameworks, you know, be present in these discussions, meet the different stakeholders and try to really, you know, be helpful in this possibility to get more coordination at that level. Then we will work with, for example, the Commission on shaping this idea of this corporate reporting lab. So it's not set in stone yet, but we see some promising, you know, moves of important stakeholders. So that would be a very interesting vehicle to actually shape the future of corporate reporting, have technology, and really move away from the traditional reporting and really embrace, you know, the possibilities and of technology and really listen to the different stakeholders and their needs. And that, you know, links to the last point of technology, where, for example, during our digital day in June 2018, we will have a session on corporate reporting and the technology agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.